The irony is not lost on me that we recorded an episode on ADHD productivity during my least productive month in a long time. Between burnout, extra work, and lots of life changes, both personally and professionally, I had to take the time to rest. The good news is my summer is almost here and I have a lot of positive changes ahead. Outside of rest and recovery, my goal this summer is to hyper-focus on Planner Club and course content so I have it ready to go for the rest of the year. You can find my executive functioning planner, prioritization tools, and other printable planner content in my monthly Planner Club. And I'm building up the resource library for the full course membership. You can find them on my website at embracingintensity.com. In addition to finding Arianna on Instagram and YouTube, she's also hosting a Chase the Chaos Summit in September. You can find the details in the show notes. Enjoy! So excited to have Arianna Bradford here with us today to talk about ADHD productivity. Arianna, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
So there's a whole thing in my presentation here about who I am. So we'll get into that a little bit more. But for right now, my name is Arianna Bradford. I am an ADHD coach and I myself have ADHD. So I'm amongst good company.
Awesome. And a little background with Arianna, we actually met in real life in a networking group of moms, and she was doing photography and this project, the Not Your Average Mom project, and a bunch of things around that, which was great. And when I interviewed her and I made a bunch of shorts for stories of growing up, basically neurodivergent, and her story was one of the most relatable to me as a person with ADHD, but she didn't actually have ADHD at the time. So when she announced that she had gotten that diagnosis, I was not surprised. And I've loved seeing everything that you've done ever since. So
yeah, I don't think anybody who knows me is surprised that I also have ADHD.
But you do manage to do quite a lot. So I'm excited to hear from you. So
thank you.
Awesome. So I'm going to go ahead and mute everyone and let Arianna dive in.
Cool. Before I get started, just a couple of things that I wanted to make sure that we all knew. The first is a personal thing. I took a pretty rough hit to the head about a week ago, and I am still recovering from a minor concussion. So if it sounds like I'm searching for words, if it sounds like I'm kind of having to think, I promise you that I actually know the stuff I'm telling you. It's just, it's taking me a minute. The other thing is just as a reminder for everybody here, for anybody who's listening, nothing that I say is meant to apply to all ADHD people. One of my favorite things ever said to me was said by a therapist friend of mine. He said, if you meet one person with ADHD, you've met one person with ADHD. So if you hear something I'm saying and you're like, that doesn't apply to me, that doesn't mean anything. Like everything that I'm saying here is going to be very like basic. It's kind of the foundation of how I think of productivity and how I teach other people with productivity. But that does not mean that if it doesn't work for you, that means that there's something wrong with you or me. That just basically means that you need something a little bit different. So hopefully these are all going to be concepts that you can kind of take and run with and make your own. But just as a reminder, because I've realized that a lot of us in the neurodivergent spaces tend to take things personally sometimes, and we'll be like, this does not apply to me. How dare you? That's okay. That's okay. Okay. And with that, let me go ahead and pull up my thing here. All right. So this is just, like I said, what to know about ADHD and productivity, what I know about it, anything that might be able to help you guys out. So first, we're going to start with who I am. That's why I was very short, because I was like, I already put this in there just to let you know why you should be listening to me on this. I was diagnosed with ADHD in 2021 at the age of 35. And that came kind of as Aurora and I touched on. It came as a surprise to no one, really. I had found out that I had ADHD thanks to looking up a diagnosis for my son. My son was 5 years old. He was starting to struggle at school, and it just really felt like there was something going on there. As we started looking into ADHD and I started looking into what ADHD looks like for adults, it really resonated with me. It made sense that a lot of things that I'd struggled with as a kid made sense. So I went and I got the diagnosis. And it changed my life, as you would imagine any diagnosis would. But it changed it in a way that I feel a lot of diagnoses don't, in that it retroactively connected me to a lot of things that did not make sense. And suddenly they did. And suddenly they weren't bad or wrong or shameful. They were who I was, which was kind of mind blowing. And one of the things that occurred to me is that despite having ADHD, I didn't really know what the problem was, quote unquote, was with my brain, but I had figured out ways to do things that a lot of people with ADHD struggle with on the regular. I wrote a book. I had started a couple of businesses by that point. I was growing communities. I was homeschooling my children. I was doing a number of things that supposedly people with ADHD weren't supposed to be able to do. And I realized that a lot of that had to do with how I had built productivity processes and how I had come to think of productivity in connection with who I was, with my brain. And knowing ADHD made it so that I was even better equipped to figure out how to work with brains like mine. So I decided to become specifically an ADHD productivity coach, even though that is even kind of starting to encompass artists and things like that as well, because as we all know, ADHDers cannot stay on any one thin line. But now I work with people who have brains like ours to help them figure out productivity and task management processes that make sense for their brains. And that's what I do. Where I'm at, I am in Costa Rica. That's where I live. I live here with my 2 children and my husband. It is a sunny, awesome day outside. I'm hoping it's going to rain. We are in the middle of rainy season. What else? I am a musician. I am a writer. I am a host of things. And I try to also help ADHDers understand that it's okay to be multi-passionate and to focus on multiple things, because we are not told enough that we're allowed to do that, which we'll get into more later. So what is productivity? And we're talking of this literally right now. So the definition, if you look it up, is the effectiveness of productive effort, especially in industry, measured in terms of the rate of output per unit of input. Sounds like it was written by a robot, right? Therein lies the problem, because we take this and we apply it to human beings. This kind of cold, heartless definition is applied to people who are warm and with a heart. Therein lies our mistake, especially with ADHD. So productivity, when you are an individual with ADHD, so productivity is different for everyone, but when you have ADHD, productivity is best defined by what it isn't. It is not an arbitrary number or percentage. Anybody who has worked in any sort of business anywhere, you're used to hearing 30% productivity. Productivity is up 50%. Productivity is up 75%. You are not just this machine. You are not a robot. You are not a percentage. And especially with ADHD, that is not what productivity is. Productivity for you is set by you. It is not set by anyone else. You have deadlines set by other people, but you are not responsible for what other people's productivity levels are and aren't. And it is not a measure of how many things you've gotten done. When I say this, a lot of people stare at me like, isn't that the whole definition of productivity? And I usually wind up saying, weren't you listening? The answer is no. It is not about how many things you've gotten done, because as we all know, especially with ADHD, we can wind up getting a bunch of stuff done that was not what we wanted to get done. We'll say, oh my God, I did like 7 things today, and not one of them was what I actually planned to get done. So there is a difference in what productivity is and what it isn't for us and for people with the neurotypicality, I guess would be the term, that would be the noun. Remember that we are working in a world that is set up according to numbers and rules that don't have us in mind, okay? The world was not set up by ADHD people. What was expected of us was not set up by ADHD people. It was set up by people who do not have the same challenges and the same strength that we do. So it's really not fair of you to yourself to try to judge productivity according to what it is, when what it is, as we understand it, is not built by people like us. right? You're setting yourself up for failure from the jump, thinking that way. So you don't want to do that. So how do we measure productivity with ADHD? We're going to do this in regards to three things. Our upcoming external deadlines, okay, not personal deadlines. And we'll get into that more when we get older, when we get further on. But your external deadlines are the important deadlines. The deadlines that you set for yourself are a commitment, but they're not the most important deadlines for your mental health's sake. You're going to also look into, speaking of mental health, how stressed or anxious you're feeling about where you are with things. If you feel like you are getting things done, but by the skin of your teeth, that's important. If you feel like you're getting things done and you feel like you have wiggle room, that is also important. And for the last thing here, your satisfaction at the end of the day is how you're going to measure your productivity. And we'll get into how to look at all three of these things. You're going to hear me say a few times that productivity is satisfaction, not perfection. A lot of us tend to see productivity as being able to knock everything off of our to-do list in one day. That is not what that is. That is the bullshit that I was talking about that was not made for us. Okay. So all three of these things, we're going to start with the first here on how to make sure that you satisfy that first metric.